Maturity isn't strictly tied to how old you are. It's about how you handle life's curveballs, how you treat the people around you, and whether you've learned to take responsibility for your own choices. Some people hit their 30s still operating with the mindset of a teenager, while others seem to have figured things out well before adulthood officially kicks in. Whether you're doing a little self-reflection or quietly thinking of someone you know, this list of 20 signs covers both ends of the spectrum, so you can get an honest picture of where you actually stand. 1. You blame everyone else when things go wrong. If your first instinct after a setback is to point the finger at someone else, that's a pretty reliable sign that emotional maturity hasn't quite arrived yet. Taking ownership of your mistakes, even the ones that sting a little, is one of the most important skills you can develop as an adult. People who can't do this tend to repeat the same patterns over and over because they never stop to examine their own role in how things turned out. 2. You can't handle criticism without getting defensive. There's a big difference between receiving feedback and hearing a personal attack. And if those two things feel the same to you, that's worth examining. Mature people understand that constructive criticism is actually one of the fastest ways to grow, so they try to listen with an open mind rather than immediately shutting down. If every piece of feedback sends you into defense mode, you're likely missing out on some valuable opportunities to improve. 3. You expect others to always accommodate your feelings. It's completely reasonable to want people in your life to be sensitive and considerate, but expecting everyone to constantly walk on eggshells around you is a different story. Emotional regulation is a skill, and part of growing up is learning to manage your own feelings rather than requiring others to manage them for you. When you start holding people responsible for your emotional state, it puts a lot of unnecessary strain on your relationships. 4. You avoid hard conversations at all costs. Conflict avoidance might feel like keeping the peace, but it usually just delays the inevitable and lets small issues fester into bigger ones. Mature adults know that having a direct, honest conversation, even when it's uncomfortable, is almost always better than letting resentment build up silently. If you consistently find yourself ghosting, venting to third parties, or just hoping problems disappear on their own, it's time to build some conflict resolution skills. 5. Your spending habits are completely impulsive. Financial immaturity is one of those things that often goes unnoticed until it causes a real crisis, like running out of money before the end of the month or racking up debt on things you didn't actually need. Adults who are financially grounded understand that delayed gratification isn't punishment, it's just smart planning. If the idea of budgeting feels restrictive or boring, rather than practical, that's a signal that your relationship with money could use some work. 6. You need constant validation to feel good about yourself. Checking how many likes your post got, constantly seeking reassurance from friends, or feeling genuinely deflated when someone doesn't praise your work are all signs that your self-worth is mostly coming from external sources. Building a stable sense of self means developing the ability to feel confident even when the applause isn't there, which takes time and self-awareness. The more your mood depends on other people's reactions, the more vulnerable you become to situations you can't control. 7. You struggle to keep your commitments. Canceling plans last minute, missing deadlines, or saying yes to things you already know you won't follow through on is a habit that tends to frustrate the people around you, and for good reason. Reliability is one of the simplest ways you demonstrate respect for other people's time and trust, and it's a quality that's genuinely hard to fake over the long term. If your word doesn't mean much, it's worth asking yourself why you keep making promises you don't intend to keep. 8. You treat customer service workers poorly. How you behave toward people who are serving you, especially when something goes wrong, says a tremendous amount about your character and emotional development. Immature people tend to take out their frustration on whoever is in front of them, regardless of whether that person is actually responsible for the problem. The ability to stay respectful and composed when you're annoyed or inconvenienced is a small but telling measure of maturity. 9. You can't sit with discomfort or boredom. The need to constantly be entertained, stimulated, or distracted is something most people associate with childhood, but plenty of adults never really outgrow it. Being able to tolerate discomfort, whether that's a dull afternoon, an awkward silence, or a difficult emotion, is a skill that pays dividends across every area of life. If you reach for your phone the moment things feel slightly boring or uncomfortable, it might be worth exploring what you're actually trying to avoid. 10. You hold on to grudges long after they've expired. There's a difference between maintaining healthy boundaries with people who've genuinely wronged you and clinging to anger as a way of maintaining the upper hand. Immature people tend to treat forgiveness as a concession rather than a personal choice that benefits them more than anyone else. When you're still bringing up a conflict from 2 years ago in arguments today, it's a pretty clear sign that you haven't fully processed it and moved on. Do you relate to any of these signs? Or are you convinced you're pretty mature for your age? Here's how to know if you fall on the good side of the scale. 1. You know when to ask for help. One of the more counterintuitive markers of maturity is the willingness to admit when you're out of your depth and actually reach out for support or guidance. A lot of people mistake stubbornness or self-sufficiency for strength. But genuinely capable adults know that getting the right help is often the most efficient and intelligent course of action. Whether it's delegating a task at work or seeing a therapist when life gets overwhelming, asking for help shows self-awareness, not weakness. 2. You can agree to disagree. Being able to hold a different opinion from someone without it turning into a referendum on their character or yours is a remarkably underrated adult skill. Mature people understand that two people can look at the same situation and come to completely different conclusions. And that doesn't make either person a bad human being. If you can walk away from a heated discussion still feeling respect for the other person, you're doing something right. 3. You take your health seriously. Prioritizing sleep, going to your annual checkups, eating reasonably well. None of these things are particularly exciting, but they're all signs that you're thinking about your future self rather than just the version of you that exists right now. Adults who've genuinely grown into themselves understand that your health is an asset worth protecting, even when the payoff feels distant. 4. You've learned to sit with uncertainty. Life rarely gives you all the information you'd like before requiring you to make a decision, and real adults have generally made peace with that reality. Rather than spiraling when things feel unclear or unresolved, emotionally mature people develop a tolerance for not knowing exactly how things will turn out. This doesn't mean they're passive. It just means they don't need everything neatly tied up before they can function. 5. You set boundaries without feeling guilty about it. Knowing what you will and won't accept in your relationships, and being able to communicate that without excessive apologizing or second-guessing, is a huge sign of emotional growth. A lot of people spend years people-pleasing simply because the discomfort of saying no feels worse than the discomfort of saying yes to things they don't want. When you can hold a boundary calmly and consistently without it feeling like a moral failing, you've hit a genuinely important milestone. 6. You've stopped comparing your life to other people's. Social comparison is something almost everyone does to some degree, but mature adults have generally figured out that measuring your progress against someone else's highlight reel is a losing game. When you're secure in your own path, other people's successes stop feeling like a threat and can actually start to feel inspiring. Getting to a place where you're genuinely rooting for others without any bitterness attached is a real marker of personal growth. 7. You follow through, even when motivation fades. Motivation is a fleeting feeling, and adults who've been around long enough know you can't rely on it to get things done consistently. Real follow-through comes from discipline, habit, and a commitment to what you said you'd do, even on the days when you'd rather do absolutely anything else. If you've learned to push through the low-energy days and still meet your obligations, you're operating with a level of self-discipline that genuinely sets you apart. 8. You give without keeping score. Mature generosity means doing something kind, helpful, or supportive without filing it away as something that needs to be repaid later. When you find yourself getting resentful because you feel like you're always the one giving and no one's reciprocating, it's worth examining whether you were ever giving freely in the first place. People who've genuinely grown up emotionally tend to give because it aligns with their values, not because they're expecting an equal exchange. 9. You've made peace with your past. This doesn't mean pretending bad things didn't happen or that you weren't affected by them. It means you've reached a point where your past no longer has a grip on your present-day choices and relationships. Adults who've done this kind of inner work tend to be far less reactive, more empathetic, and genuinely more pleasant to be around. Getting to this place usually takes real effort, whether that's through therapy, self-reflection, or simply the passage of time paired with honest introspection. 10. You know that growing up is an ongoing process. Perhaps the clearest sign of all that you're a real adult is the humble acknowledgement that you don't have it all figured out, and you probably never fully will. Mature people approach life with curiosity rather than the need to appear as if they've already arrived. And they stay genuinely open to learning and changing as they go. Recognizing that growth is a lifelong commitment rather than a destination you eventually reach is, ironically, one of the most grown-up realizations there is.